Hi, I'm Matt Dragonstone, and this time on the Dragonstone podcast, we're going to follow on from the previous episode about Chiron with the full interview with Lance Baker. In the previous episode, I wanted to present a very specific thesis about Chiron, and I incorporated this interview into that episode, and as a result, I had to cut it down considerably. There was a lot of content that is really amazing about Lance's journey that I wasn't able to include. So this time I'm just going to present the entire interview from beginning to end, and I'll come back in at the end with some closing thoughts. So let's get straight into it. So, Lance, there's a narrative with Chiron, which is about, the wounded healer as an archetype. The two are sort of, inextricably linked. And the reason why I wanted to talk to you today is because your narrative and the narrative that goes along with a Chiron transit or Chiron prominently placed in someone's birth chart, they're kind of very similar in a way that I think people will be able to engage with. So tell us about the journey.
Well, I presume Sagittarius shot an arrow from one side of my chart to hit me in the other.
What? Yes, that's great.
But no, that's storytelling. So my life now is healing. That's what I do all day, every day. That's what most of my conversations with people involve, whether that's with energy healing or with counseling or with hypnotherapy. The whole bottom half of my house is dedicated as a healing space or teaching healing space. And none of that was intentional. None of that was in my 10-year, 20-year life year plans. I've got a piece of paper somewhere that I wrote in my 20s that was like that, a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, a life plan. And lots of those things have been ticked off, but in the context around healing. Healing was not part of that.
Nice.
And for as long as I've known in my life, I've had migraines, and as a kid, for a long time, I only called them headaches because as a kid, that's all I could explain was my head hurt, and my mum said it was a headache. And wasn't introduced to the word migraine for a long time, but it was only every now and then, and was I wish I tracked it. I think it probably would have clicked off every moon or something like that. Then in my early 20s, my left ear became blocked. It needed to pop. And I had hearing tests, no issues, perfect hearing, but I could hear the difference in the tests, but I could hear all the sounds. So they were like, you're good. So they sent me for an MRI to check that out. And the ear, nose and throat doctor put these MRI scans up on his little light box and pointed to this gigantic bright blue spot in the middle of my head. And he goes, look, I just work with ears, nose, throat, mostly ears, like what you're here for. So I don't know anything about the brain. He goes, but this and taps on it is not meant to be there. And pointed out this arachnoid cyst that's 8 by 8 by 6.5 centimeters at my left temporal side of my brain. And within a month, Charlie Teo, who's famous as a doctor at the moment, he was famous as a fantastic neurosurgeon back then. Now he's famous as a wild cowboy who leaves a trail of disaster in his wake quite often, but does some miraculous healings. And so I find it interesting with this Chiron link that it was also a wild healer that operated on me. And so he drilled a hole in my head and worked on this thing. And you can have a video of it to put in your show notes if you like. It's gruesome. You've got to have a strong stomach.
I'd be down if you are, mate. Yeah.
Go for it. And I woke up from that operation with a migraine, and it did not leave my head for 9.5 years, 24/7, just pounding. And when that finally left, it wasn't like it just faded out. It was a year I'd pretty much given up. But on my 33rd birthday, I made a declaration to myself that I couldn't do another year of this. I was going to try everything again. No matter how stupid it sounded, no matter how weird it was, I was going to try it. And tried meditation things. I tried some different drugs. I tried float tanks. And then I tried Reiki. And it seemed to help a little bit. And then I learned how to do it. And in a week and a half, that pain was gone. And that's where Chiron pretty much moved into my house. My life became healing.
Interesting. So headaches from a young age, and then an operation that ostensibly was meant to heal you, but only made things worse. Is that right?
Yes, drastically worse. It ruined my life for a decade. Till now, I look at it as something that didn't ruin my life. That's something that made my life. But that's because I can disassociate from that decade of agonizing pain.
Can we maybe, if it's all right with you, because one of the signifiers of Chiron is that it makes people who have it prominent in their charts incredibly sensitive around, particular moments of pain and moments of trauma, to the point where even talking about it can kind of bring it back. But if it's not too much to ask, can we actually talk about what the pain was? As in, can you describe it? Because I've had a migraine a couple of times that's been so bad that I've been knocked out for a day or two. And there's headaches that I get from time to time that get pretty intense. But just, don't understate.
Okay.
Yeah, let's get the story on the pain, if that's okay.
Yes. You can see my fist here with one of your pretty rings on it.
It looks delightful. Yeah.
This is pretty much the size of what's in here, and it's still there because it come back like it was there by the next scan, and it never left. So that thing has still never healed.
And presumably it was there when you were born, or it grew in early childhood, or.
Yeah, they say you're either born with it or a head injury gives it to you. So it could have kicked in. I had a couple of fights when I was in high school and had a few head blows with that. Plus, I'm probably banged my head a million times. So there's lots of things it could be. I've actually got two. I've got this one giant one here,
yeah,
and then a tiny little 2-centimeter one on the very top of my head. That one I remember. I was wearing a baseball cap with, how they have the little metal stud thing on top. This is coming off. And I was getting off a bus in town in Newey from whatever suburb I lived in at that time. And as the bus stopped, it bounced and my head hit the top of the bus, and it really, really hurt. And it's right on that spot. So I have a feeling that's where this little one's from. But the big one, I have no idea. I'm presuming it's from getting punched in the head from being an idiot teenager.
Interesting.
And so if you could imagine something as big as my fist inside of your skull, that's a lot of pressure.
Yes, well, I took your ring measurement to make you that ring, and your hand is fucking ginormous.
Yes.
Yes. So yeah, that's huge.
So there was this constant pressure that was there. So they have a thing called a pain scale, and it used to really. Can I swear on this podcast?
Oh my God, yes.
It's yours.
Please do.
Still got to check. It really fucking pissed me off with doctors. They'd be like, okay, where do you feel on the pain scale today? And so the pain scale is 1 to 10, 1 being next to nothing, 10 being excruciating. Whoa. Where's the way I can judge this? Because Am I judging it against what I've experienced, what you've experienced, what like everybody in the world has experienced? How do you do that? And most of them just said, just based on your experience of your life. And I'm like, well, how do you understand it? But anyway, outside of that, so I based it off my experiences. So it changed over the years because my experiences changed over the years. So when it started, the annoyance I had from my ear was a 10. That annoyance from my ear become a 1. It didn't change. The understanding of pain changed. And so with this new understanding of pain, that 9.5 years, the best I ever felt was a 3. Most of the time I was probably sitting around a 5 or a 6. The last 4 or 5 months, I remember I was at a 6 and I crept down to a 5 with the meditation and the Reiki I was experiencing from other healers. I'd have 10s, and the 10s still constantly changed. Like I had to reevaluate a 10 at least a dozen times in what you'd call a suicide migraine. The migraines where you contemplate suicide as the only way you could get out of that pain, because I could take 5 different kinds of painkillers and be extremely high and it would still be there. The only way I could get out of those ones would be to knock myself out, and then I'd be feeling crap still the next day, but I'd also be feeling really flat and drained because of the drugs that knocked me out. So it's complex to explain that dynamic of it. But you just said before we got on this call, you managed to listen to my interview with Jangle Bones and Kurt on Soapbox.
Yeah, it's a good interview.
Pie. And that movie, he drills into his head. He's got a migraine all through it. It's got a soundtrack that inspires migraines in a sense. It was extremely traumatizing for me to rewatch that movie while I was experiencing it, and I couldn't. I tried towards the end of my pain journey, and I still couldn't then. And it still made me have some odd experiences just like a month ago when I watched that movie again. So it did re-traumatize me in a sense, but not to the same level. The one that weirded me out the most with that, there's some crappy 90s, late 90s, maybe early 2000s comedy movie about conjoined twins. I don't remember. They're adult people. I don't even remember who's in it. But it was on telly, and I just caught like a scene of it. And this scene had Dr. Ben Carson, who's a real neurosurgeon who works on separating conjoined twins, and his specialty is conjoined twins that are conjoined at the head and doing brain surgery with them. That's like what he is. And I'd read his autobiography when I was like, I don't know, like 10. I read it when I was really young, which also bewilders me that I read a book. And the only autobiography I'd read before I turned 16 was about a neurosurgeon. And I read it twice. I was like infatuated with this book. But anyway, so this real life doctor, he's American, but he did his doctorate in Perth, in Australia.
Yep.
And I tried to see if perhaps I could get him to operate on me. I couldn't get contact. And it would have been too hard to make happen anyway. But so he pops into this movie as a cameo, which why they got him to be a cameo in this movie, I don't know, but they did, to separate these conjoined twins. And it just hit me. And I'd been healed for probably 2-3 years at that point. And I thought I was all over it. I didn't have like murder fantasies about Charlie Teo anymore. So I thought, I'm good. And then I see Ben Carson on TV for like 3 seconds, and just emotion hits me like a bag of bricks, and I ran upstairs crying. Weird.
So to say that this was an ordeal would be an understatement then, because that sounds ridiculous. Because not only were you experiencing these, absolutely almost unbearable, levels of pain that would push you into these suicide migraines, but you were also a carpet salesman as well, weren't you? Like you were living a life. You were trying to function outside of, that experience of pain, I'm assuming, right?
Yes. I didn't just have a carpet job.
Okay.
I had just become a manager in a carpet shop, like just before. Like I had to take time off my new role as manager of a carpet shop to have the operation, and then through that, I leveled up with it to like go from managing a little store to moving to this other carpet company who had 6 stores, and I managed 3 different ones of those over time, and had the biggest one and did most of the training for all their employees. At times, I was their best salesman while being a manager, which usually didn't happen for most people. And when I found Reiki, how I found Reiki was I went to a tarot reader like yourself to have a reading because I was going to buy a guy's carpet shop. So I could still get on with life, but I'd get to work, I'd do my job, I'd come home, and I'd just lay on the floor and watch TV. And that was my life. But the way it interfered with my life was only when I got to like a 9.5 was when I'd have a sick day. Like I had sick days up my sleeve when I quit, because I had to make money. I had to pay for my mortgage. I had to provide for my wife and child. She couldn't make as much money as I could. So
yeah,
that was it. So it was interesting as well. Most people from my life back then also had no idea. I masked really well.
Jesus, like how, I mean, this is probably going to turn into a tangent, but this is really interesting. How would you mask living with, a fist-sized cyst in your head and pain that would occasionally make you sort of consider, your options in a more serious way? How do you mask doing that? Because this is really painting that picture of suffering, really.
Well, like I said, the thing that was a 10 become understanded to me as a 1. And so I had new 10s. But you get used to stuff. Like when you've got a bruise, it hurts when you first get it. And the next day, it might still hurt. But the week after that, it only hurts when you push on it. You forget about it. I was able to like tune out and make it a background noise so I could always feel it without always paying attention to it. Once it crossed a threshold, I couldn't. And then I'd take drugs and I'd do quick acting things. Like I would buy kids medicine. So the one I'd have was Pain Stop, was what it was called. They had a daytime one and a nighttime one. And it was like you meant to have 3 mils of it if you're a kid or whatever, and they'd sell it in like, I don't know, 100 or 200 ml bottles. And I just guzzle down half a bottle. And
it's truth.
Yeah. I started measuring it, but then I gave up measuring it. I just have some swigs, and if it was bad, I'd just guzzle down half. But I'd have that because the liquid would absorb into my body quicker than a tablet. So it was a neat little hack I found. Expensive, but a neat little hack. Probably terrible for my body. but you could do that sort of thing and nobody would notice. Like I'd have a bottle of that in my glove box. I'd have some Disprin in there, some Panadol. I had a keyring that like could have these other drugs in it that were quick acting, that when I noticed a 10 was starting to come, if I had one of these tablets early enough, then it'd feel like a 7.
Jesus.
But yeah, you just get used to hiding. I also had vertigo as well. And I was surprised I could master that as well as I did. In a carpet shop, luckily, there's lots of stands that are like elbow high. So I could like walk while putting my hands on things and leaning on things all the time.
Lots of soft landings, I imagine, rolls.
And yes, and soft landings. I didn't fall too often with that vertigo. It was not a super intense vertigo. It was just like everything spinning and wobbly. And if it got bad enough, I'd know to lay down.
Yeah. So from that experience of dedicating what I imagine was a lot of resources to presenting as someone who isn't suffering from pain pretty much 24/7 of the kind that's completely debilitating, into that landscape comes Reiki, and the result of a very brief encounter was enough to catalyze something quite revolutionary for you, right? So to say that the introduction of Reiki into your life was revolutionary may not be saying too much, so to speak. It might not be, overinflating it, because it sounds to me like, from what I understand of your journey, from where I've heard you speak elsewhere, that was incredibly life-changing. And also talking about fast acting.
Yes.
Quite fast acting as well, I believe.
Yeah. Like Reiki been helping a bit. I was sleeping better, and I was half a point or a point better on a pain scale after a couple of months of having a session every week. And I could feel stuff happening. Like I knew stuff was happening. I was having, I could feel energy releasing from my head. And I had a lot of weird esoteric experiences happen. So I was in with Reiki of seeing it was going to do something for me, but I still had zero expectation it was going to take it away. Like I thought, I'm going to get this down, then I'm going to get to a point where I live at a free. And that to me was gold. Like that was me winning a lottery. If I could set my life within half a point of 3 or 4, I'd be gold. And like I said, I was trying to learn how to meditate and stuff as well. I'm not a good visual imaginator, so I was having a hard time with meditation, of listening to guided things and stuff. And so I Googled searched meditation class Newcastle this Saturday, and nothing come up, which normally things like the Buddhist Center and people like myself, things had come up, even if it's not the exact day. But the top hit on Google was a Reiki class, and it said you could do it yourself. And I didn't know you could do Reiki on yourself back then. So I signed up. And my thoughts when I was signing up was, if I do this in between those sessions with Leander, I'll be able to like keep the level of where she's got me. Like, because I noticed I felt better, and then the next day I'd feel worse, and like the pain would be upping and downing between these sessions. So I thought, I'm going to be able to flatline and keep some of that healing she's giving me and just top up little bits. I'm no one compared to her, so I'm not going to do anything. That was just my expectation. And then I went there and they attuned me, and then when I did an energy ball and I could feel that energy in my hands, that was a moment it had me, because I'm like, this is amazing. I'd studied theology. Like I was going to be a pastor at one stage, and I left because Christians just burnt me. But when I held this energy, I was like, this is it. This is what I was searching for all those years ago when I was looking down that Christian path of this has got, like, this is the Holy Spirit in between my hands right now. And so I don't think Reiki would have left my life if it didn't give me the result it had. But then, like, I wasn't super actively trying to heal this. I was doing the practices to get good enough to be able to help cope. And I didn't even notice when it went. Like, that's how much I was used to being able to ignore it. And
Yeah.
I built this man cave out the back of my house, and I was working a Thursday night, so I'd had the morning off. So I was probably playing video games or something in the man cave that morning. Maybe I'd been doing Reiki practice. I don't think so. No. And I was leaving there, and I was shutting the door, and I was 1 foot in and 1 foot out. And I'm like, I'm forgetting something. I've checked my pockets. I got my keys. I got my wallet. I got my phone. Like, I don't have a migraine. I shut that door pretty quick. On the car, went to work. I'm like, when's that come back? Where is it? I was expecting it to come back real quick.
Yeah.
And it didn't. And so that moment, Reiki was definitely not going to leave my life. That was the point where it's like, well, I'm better than the answer you were seeking. I'll give you way more. And I couldn't hide from it then. And as weird as I thought it was, like when I went to do that class, it was my secret. Like the only person who knew was the person I was married to at the time.
That's fair.
And I wasn't going to tell anyone. But then they told me I needed to practice, so I needed to like speak to other people. And so because I felt it, I'm like, okay, I'll at least talk to some people about it. But yeah, from there, I became a pretty avid spokesperson for energy healing.
Pardon me. No, that's, I mean, you may have wanted to be a pastor, but the evangelist never left you, I think, in terms of your enthusiasm for the things that you're passionate about.
Yes.
It was your enthusiasm for energy healing that got me on board with Reiki.
Yes. And
the attunement that I was able to participate in was wonderful and something deeply mysterious. It was a mysterious moment of sort of meeting Reiki in a way. But I mean, the story post this experience of healing, which was transformative enough for you to stop yourself and go, Jesus, I don't have a migraine right now. You didn't just hang your shingle immediately and start healing people, though. There had to have been a transitional period between the epiphany and then the art of sort of translating that into the healing relationship with the other. So what happened next, mate?
Yeah. Well, it was still just going to be about me. I'll admit, I'm a Leo, and I wasn't finely tuned Leo back then. So it was mine and my power. Stay with me. So like I was only Reiki 1 with that. So I don't know how long it was. I think it was 3 months later. I did Reiki 2. And the people who I did Reiki 2 with, they did Reiki 2 in a way where you do a retreat weekend that's like 2 days and an evening. That was Reiki 2 and Master, but you got to come back twice for that. And I'd been doing a lot of practice with it, and I'd had that miraculous healing. You can imagine, like after that experience, I was playing with it all the time. And so I turn up to this Reiki 2 class, and they told me I was already Reiki Master, and what had I been doing in between? Like they couldn't believe what I was capable of in between. Maybe they were blowing smoke up my ass, which as a Leo I was graciously accepting. Or maybe they'd noticed the difference. It was in my head that they could have been doing either at the time, but I'd had that miraculous healing, and I was like, well, that explains it. I've tapped into something better with that. And I still didn't like hang my shingle up after I did Reiki 2. And that's the point where most people feel comfortable to practice. When I went back 6 months later to finish my Reiki Master, it was after then. So I'd had somebody ask me to do Reiki from their place. And I was like, well, I will, after this date, when I'm a master, that's when I'll be comfortable to do it. But it was still just giving sessions. When I did it, they told me I'd be teaching. They told me they could see me teaching auditoriums, hundreds of people at once. So that achievement you're in, there was 180 people there.
Yeah, that's
Virtual
true.
auditorium, but still, it was. So I was still telling myself, like, this is just for me, really, when I was planning on doing Reiki Master. And then it was like I couldn't stop the things coming that were just like Chiron was bashing down my door.
Yeah.
My first paying client had a shattered hip. And after a second session, she got up and walked. I felt like Jesus that moment. I will admit I had a Leo moment where my head exploded. The next week, though, she come back and she had a crutch. No, she had a walking stick. But it proved I didn't heal the bone. I just made her feel good enough to be able to walk again. And I seen her every week till she got a hip replacement. I seen her weeks after that. I taught her Reiki and stuff too. But it was just that first job I had doing it was at the float center, and he stayed open late on Thursday nights and Friday nights.
Mm-hmm.
And so I took appointments on Thursday nights and Friday nights outside of my work, and some Saturdays. And it was a side gig. I wanted to get out and do it full time, but I didn't think I could. Eventually, I did. I had the shits with like the owner of my company, and he wanted. I'd started working an extra day at a hippie shop, so I sit there all day on Fridays waiting for somebody to come in to have a session. And some days I'd sit there and no one would want a session. Some days I'd have a few sessions. Most of the time it was a maximum of 2. So it was a big waste of a day. And
we've all been there, mate.
and I'd be bringing home like $60 for that day if I got 2 people.
Oh yeah.
And my like day job, I was a manager. I was getting like $90K a year. I had a car, phone. It was on a pretty good deal. And I had a conversation with them, and they wanted me to change my roster, and I had to work Fridays. And Fridays was days I worked at this hippie shop. And I said, no. I said, look, how about this? How about I go to 4 days a week instead? I want to do part-time because I want to do Reiki more. And they're like, no. We're not letting anybody be part-time, especially not a manager, especially not in our biggest store.
This is the carpet game, son. You should get your shit together. Yeah.
Get your shit together to do this. You don't do that hippie stuff. And I was like, okay, well, you know what? Fuck you. Shove your job up your ass. I'm done. And I quit. And I was like, I make like $150 a week out of Reiki. I just threw away a good paying job. But in between that time, I'd also got divorced, and I was going to have to sell the house. So I had money, and I did it way too quick. But 2 days later, another carpet shop goes, "Oh, I heard you're not working there anymore. I want to give you a job." I was like, "No, I don't want to work." And carpet, they're like, no, pick your wage, pick your days. And I'm like, "Oh, okay." So I threw a number at him that I didn't think he'd give somebody to be a shit kicker in his carpet shop 3 days a week. And he said yes. So I did that, and it quickly turned into 4 days a week. But luckily it was at the rate that I'd said was hourly, not for a week. And I did that for maybe 6 months, and my business's healing was just stalemated. It just didn't grow while I was doing that. And I was like, no, the call is too strong now. I need to do this. So I quit, and I burnt down till I had next to nothing in my bank. I'd invested everything I had into it. I told myself I had 80 grand after my divorce, and I told myself I'd burn it down to 40. And if I got to 40 and I wasn't making it, I'd go back to carpet. And I had him calling me like every month offering me a job. And I got to 40, And I was like, no, this is going to work. I could see it happening. I'm getting close to breaking even most weeks. So I just kept going. And yeah, I got down to having like something like 30, $40 in my bank. And I'm like, I'm going to have to call Nick. And then I looked at my PayPal account. I had like $200. And I looked at my Try Booking account. And I had another few $100. And it turned out I had like $2,000. I didn't have as much as I thought. But from that point, it built up. And
So did you notice a difference in your feeling of wellness, right? While you were healing yourself versus when you were healing other people? Because the story is that, you had the miraculous experience with Reiki and then, began to sort of learn more, and all the while practicing, and I'm assuming practicing on yourself as well. And then the step into, the role of healer and working with others. Did you notice, have you noticed the symptoms getting lesser as you heal more people, or where does it leave the pain to be in relation to the other?
Well, the pain disappeared. It was gone.
It was gone. Yeah.
It was gone.
And it didn't come back. That's the
in that week and a half, I did heal other people, like probably every second day. Other people. So I was doing the healing other people at the start, and I was focusing on that more than self-healing. So it was healing other people that seemed to play a big part.
Yep.
But in hindsight, I know when it was now, because I had like this miraculous night where I experienced some weird shit doing self-Reiki. And I focused on that as like the phenomena of what I experienced. There was like, wow. And I tried to repeat that the next night, and it didn't happen. And then the next day was when I realized the pain was gone. So I probably went 2 days without the pain and still didn't even notice. I don't know. Or it faded out from that point to the point where I didn't notice.
And now you're in a situation where you're not only healing but teaching others as well, right? So there's that progression from, the work on the self, the experience of pain, the subsequent experience of healing, and now going out to others and healing others in many different modalities than just Reiki, as I understand it.
Yes. Yeah. Now teaching is a big part of what I do, mostly because of that factor for me of it was the self-healing component that did it for me. So I'm like, well, anybody who needs self-healing should have it. So I made a dedication years ago that I would make it as available as I could. So I'd put a class up every month, and as long as 2 people wanted to do it, I'd run it. And I ran a class every month for probably the last 6 years now, since I've been doing it monthly, other than when we're in lockdown. And then I did one online, but it took me a while to build the confidence up to do a Reiki class online because I was so used to the hands-on approach and I didn't want to half-ass it. But I did put out a basic thing like in the first week of lockdown of a free initial attunement for people to get themselves started. But I remember the first class I did, it was terrible. It was absolutely terrible. It was the hippie shop I worked at.
Yes.
They had people wanting to learn Reiki and they wanted a cut. They're like, come on, when are you going to teach? Can you teach this class? You can do it. You're a master. And so I taught the class and I was like reading from the book as I was doing it. It was clunky. I offered everybody who came to that class a free repeat because I taught them so badly, I thought. And I didn't teach again for a year. And it was like that class was probably within 6 months of me being a Reiki master. So I didn't have the experiences to be good at it. But I made sure before I did it again, I'd know the Reiki 1 material back to front, that I would not have a book in my hand, and I don't. And yeah, it was just that Leo pride, I guess. If you're going to do something, you've got to do it right. So I had to do it right.
There is also a leonine determination, like a determinism to get the job done, and not only to get the job done, but also to, like, be triumphant and be victorious and not give up. And
Yes.
if we flash forward to today, it's a different scenario to that first workshop, isn't it? There's a lot of things that you do. I see your Instagram, I follow you on Facebook, and we will link in the show notes for people who are interested. And you're doing so much stuff all the time, right? Within that field, teaching and also healing as well. What kind of things are you up to these days?
So hypnotherapy is a big one. So I found hypnotherapy by accidentally putting people in a trance with Reiki and having to explore that. And weirdly, like with the story I have for energy healing, I had always presumed like that, well, this is it. Like, this is what I'll be known for. And I'm way more well known around the world for hypnosis than I am for energy healing. I've got an energy healing book, and it's like had piss poor sales its whole life. And I've got a hypnosis book, and it's been a bestseller. It's getting translated into another language at the moment, and it's something I found completely by accident. I don't have a personal story of like miraculous healing from what I've done with hypnosis for myself. I've got plenty of things I've done for others. So hypnosis is a huge one, and a big bit of that is the energetic side of things. So part of what I inadvertently found when I was doing Reiki was following intuition. I started doing mesmerism, which I didn't know at the time, which is the energetic precursor to hypnosis. And I didn't find that out for like another 2 years later, what it was I was doing. And that's something that I'm pretty focused on. So I ran a workshop for the first time solely on that. Like, normally I've always put that in as a bit of my hypnosis class, but I ran a 2-day workshop based off a French manual that I'd translated in the last lockdown from 1818. And so I taught this old process of energy healing, of hypnosis. But most of my hypnosis outside of the energy healing concept is communication with deeper parts of people's consciousness. But like all the other things that come across you when you start doing energy healing and hypnosis, like crystals and meditation and pendulums, these are all things I also run workshops on. And I have one coming up. I think I put it on August 5th and 6th, because August 5th is the anniversary of that start of the pain. So I always try and do something special on that day. And I have my own energy healing process that is called Atman Akasha. And it like integrates some traditional Chinese medicine things. It's chakra-based things. It's just what I've intuitively done and found in different little things, looking at other healing things of how I can play with energy. So yeah, that's one of the other things I do. But yeah,
that's brilliant. That's beautiful. First of all, thanks for sharing the story. Being able to trace the way in which you progressed from pain and inexplicable pain, you couldn't explain it in a way that people would listen to you and understand, to excruciating pain and a traumatic experience with, and this will become relevant later, keyhole surgery to remove a cyst. And, I'm just mindful of the symbol for Chiron. It's an upside down key.
Yes.
To yet more pain, to also that shift which allowed Reiki to come in. And the sort of level of willing to try anythingness that you had to be at to allow that opening to take place. And then to practitioner and healer of others, having healed oneself, to teacher of others. And obviously Reiki isn't where it stopped. Ways lead on to ways in the healing game as in the fortune telling game. But the thing that I really dig about this particular story is that healing and teaching, they're both other related activities. Okay? So you can heal yourself and you can definitely be an autodidact. But mostly when we think about healing and teaching, we're talking about a relationship with the other. And you've pointed out a couple of times the way in which the Leo pride and the leonine ego was there at the beginning, but has, just based off what you said, been tempered a little bit by your experience of changing that relationship to the other, right?
Yeah. Part of what Reiki has taught me is humility and humbled me. Like you'd think the decade of pain would have humbled me, but no, it takes a lot to humble a Leo. But yeah, like the different things I've had to read and come past me, and meditations and things I've done have really taught me that humility. And my first introduction to starting to understand astrology was with that component, is where I looked at it and seen all this stuff people talk about with Leos, that I took it as that's part of a Leo's life journey, is to get through that ego stage where you can carry that confidence without meaning it takes over somebody else's status or confidence. The king that goes to be with his people rather than the king that sits in the tower and looks down at them and makes them bring him stuff. So
it's I pointed out, and particularly the Leo thing, because you told me a very leonine story before we started recording, and I'll recount it if you don't mind, because it's the only way I can't laugh hearing it, because it's great. First of all, you were going for a haircut, which is, the Leo pastime par excellence, right? You've got to sort of keep the mane looking good. And there are certain stereotypes about star signs that are completely abhorrent, and I don't believe them, and I think they're inaccurate. But there are some that always stick. I've not yet met a Sagittarius that can't do a very good horse impression. They can all do it, and one of the ones for Leo is you guys tell very good jokes and very good stories. But also the number one stereotype about how to piss off a Leo is to cut in front of them in line. And the story you told me was walking in, sitting down, and then some guy comes in after you but gets served before you. And your response to this was wonderful, because it puts you in a league of leonine people that is very small. You took the attitude towards that of this guy just saved me from a bad haircut, and then the experience that you had led to the wonderful hairdo that you're sporting tonight, mate. So that's a great example of like a very sort of refined and conscious and aware response to a situation, regardless of your star sign, but in my opinion, especially if you're a Leo. And the reason why I bring it up is that there's this relationship with Chiron when it's transiting through your chart, or whether it's, a big part of the story from the day dot, where you go through an experience of pain and then basically you learn a lot of stuff. And that includes the acquisition of knowledge, but it's also an awareness of self through a relationship to the other. And the thing that I get a lot about the significations of Chiron is that it describes a wound that never entirely goes away. The ailment, the physical manifestation of whatever the woundedness is may be, mitigated or cured, but the space that's left by the wound, even if it ostensibly heals, is always there. Right.
Thanks. So I was hoping I'd be able to heal this last bit.
Heal the last bit. But, there's no reason why you can't. But what I
just told me.
No, there's no reason why you can't fully heal. But your life is forever changed by that experience of pain, and then the relationship to the cure that came afterwards. And that's kind of the dynamic that we find in Chiron. We have to step outside of ourselves in order to heal ourselves, basically. We get insights into ourselves when we're working in relationship with the other in a way that makes them whole. It also just makes us a little bit more sort of whole and integrated as a result. And so, and that was really quite a glib example, of course, with the barbershop. I'm not implying that all Leos are egotistical maniacs, but the way that you're describing the story is this journey from, wanting to hold the power within yourself to sharing it with others and then arriving at a place that's entirely different to where you began. Even job wise, even, mindset wise, your disposition towards other people has changed. And there's that sort of experience-based sensitivity.
Yes.
So how are you working with others now versus, say, 20 years ago, give or take?
20 years ago, that would have been 20 years ago would have been just before the operation, because I've had like 9.5 years roughly-ish now, in the post-pain, and I had 9.5 years of pain. So before that, I was working in retrovision, slinging TVs and stuff like that. And my interactions with everybody then was, I wanted life to be cruisy. Actually, no. Yeah, at that point was when I got that cruisy with work. I went part-time to work a day or two a week at Retrovision and studied business diploma at TAFE, and would skate most days and hang out with people and talk shit. And
Newcastle was a very easy place to be cruisy back then.
Yeah,
20 years ago.
I had a life where I was a little bit older than everybody else at TAFE, so I was just the cooler, slightly older guy who had an apartment with walls full of CDs and DVDs and stuff. And so like people would come back to my place and like watch skate videos or chill out to music or do whatever, drink, a lot of drinking. So yeah, my interaction with people then, I was still that Leo center of attention sort of thing, but it was just in getting people to have the sage stuff come out, getting people to have fun, party, be stupid, so that is now my life is getting people together, doing the preacher sort of thing about self-healing, and I'm fostering people's healing. I'm not getting them drunk or stoned. We're hanging out and talking about how I can get them to see the best in themselves or others, and that'd be the big difference. There was a blip as well that Chiron taught me something new recently, as you heard on Soapbox, where I talked about that because I was going through that process then, that I need to do self-healing all the time still too. Like this past year has been a whirlwind for me. Like I moved my clinic from Newcastle to East Maitland. It's only like 45 minutes, but it's still a big move. And I had to build a space. Like I had this big open garage and I built walls, I painted, I did electrical work, I'd done all sorts of stuff. And so I stayed up till 2 a.m. every night for most nights of the year, doing this place up while working full time. And I've got a toddler, and my partner's got a child as well, and I've got a teenage autistic boy who doesn't come as often now, but still hangs out here a bit. So I was busy, and once I got this place ready and running, I've been doing a lot more workshops and stuff to make use of the space and enjoy it and do that bit that I love. So I was was working hard. I wasn't doing as much self-maintenance of self-healing. And so I had a migraine come back months ago, and I reached out to you when it did. What the hell, man? What's my chart say? You're like, that doesn't look like a problem. It's a blip. And I was paranoid. I did not believe that it was a blip, and I was like freaking the fuck out. And I didn't rush to heal it away straight away, but I did some regular, just basic self-energy healing, and was observing what could this mean of where it was falling. And where my understanding is at the moment is that observance was, one, my stress levels, and two, my self-care was missing. And so I feel Chiron was saying, well, it's still not all about everybody else. Like, you're a wounded healer too. Like, change your fucking bandage, mate. And so, yeah, changes my bandages, and I do more self-healing with energy, self-hypnosis.
It's interesting. You mentioned earlier that Chiron sort of came to stay with the advent of, the headaches, and then the intervention from Charlie Teo, and then, the Reiki that came afterwards. But there's a way in which Chiron kind of never really left and has sort of always been there. Even, the being 10 years old and being interested in a book on neuroscience is one good way in which, we can kind of see the presence of Chiron. And so in a sense, there's that healing journey that was triggered by most likely a transit. I have had a brief look at the timeline of these events and matched them to where Chiron was sort of relative to where it was when you were born. And there are moments that are somewhat critical where Chiron was doing something that, triggered either itself or your ascendant or your natal sun position as well.
Yes. I think as well, though, Saturn triggered something in my yod that points to the moon, which is pretty much on Chiron as well. I can't remember if that was when it started or when it finished. But I'm not a keen astrological mind like you.
No,
but
the odds there, the moon and Chiron are conjoined in your chart. Partile conjoined, less than a degree separated.
Yes. And so I was trying to work out what yod was, because it sounded pretty cool. Finger of God,
finger of God. Yeah.
Got to be important in my healing journey when my moon and Chiron are right there involved.
Well, you don't want it pointing up Uranus, mate.
No. No. But yeah, there's I also had another experience that I'm not sure if it's linked as well or not. I broke my femur bone when I was 4. It's like the biggest bone in our body. And I had to spend 6 weeks in hospital as a 4-year-old. And I had a thing 2 years ago, a hypnosis session about a chocolate milk addiction. And I was thinking it was going to be pretty straightforward. It was a demonstration in a class, and it turned into snot pouring out of my nose and me being a blubbering mess, and this 4-year-old me coming out saying about how freaky this experience was, being isolated in this stinky cold hospital, and listening to this old man in the ward across the room from me die. After he talked about that he was there to die, and this 4-year-old me thinking I was there to die too. So I'd be curious to see Chiron's impact on that, but I don't have the exact date of that. All I know was I was 4.
Yeah, of course. Look, without looking at the chart for that year of your life, it's difficult to pin down exactly what role Chiron would have had by transit. But the thing that makes your chart chironic, in my opinion, is the conjunction of your moon with Chiron. And that's going to color the way in which you receive stimuli from the outside world on an emotional level. That's going to color your relationship to your body, which is as much the moon as it is the ascendant, depending on which school of astrology you listen to. So there would have been, unless you were literally riding a horse and fell off when you broke your femur, there would be Chiron somewhere, but maybe that was Mars, maybe that was Jupiter. Without seeing the chart, I'm not sure. But that event, the particular episode of your young life, which involved being injured, going to hospital, and then having that experience, which is then healed as an adult, that is colored by Chiron. How you processed that and took that in on an emotional level has Chiron as part of the picture, because your moon and Chiron are natally conjoined. So there's that that sort of steps in. But because the moon and Chiron are conjoined, Chiron never really sort of left. And with what you've shared with us today, there's a big role that Chiron plays in the acquisition of knowledge and wisdom through pain and suffering, the dissemination of that knowledge and wisdom, and the subsequent, deepening of the healing journey of the self. And then obviously the literal healing component of it as well. And particularly the lengths and the durations, 9 years at a time of pain, and then recovery from pain following that sort of episode of being operated on. That's significant. And, I think that that's really illustrative of what Chiron is as a planetary energy. So we'll be using your story as part of the episode, but I'm also going to make this interview available as well on YouTube and the podcatchers as a separate sort of episode, 2A or 3A, because I think it's a fascinating story, right? And I feel like the way in which you've been able to perform a monumental act of will on both sides of the miraculous healing is truly impressive. As only a Leo can be, it's a truly impressive story that you've been able to recount to us about how you are the way you are today. So thank you for sharing with us, Lance. That's really awesome. And this is the part where I ask you how people can find you, mate. Please let us know what you're up to at the moment, what you got on, and let us know where people can get in touch.
Yeah. If they're Aussies, New South Wales, East Maitland, I've got a space where you can come and sit with me and either experience some energy healing or therapy, or come and join a class and learn something new. If you're not in this area, then you can work with me on Zoom, like we're talking right here, right now. And I have plenty of people all over the world do that. branchesofhealing.com.au has links to everything that I do, I'm pretty sure. And you can book online there. I've got a podcast, Akasha Talks, where they can search for Dragonstone and Akasha Talks, and they'll find a neat little episode.
I'm a big fan of Akasha Talks as well, not just the episode that I was on, but in general, the episodes are really good and in depth, and you're an excellent interviewer as well. So I'd recommend checking it out as well.
Thanks. Do you want a funny dark Leo story before I go?
Oh, I always love a story from a Leo, bright or dark. Even the dark ones are bright, though. Come on, mate, tell us.
So, in the middle of that, finding myself in my practice and coming into the humility of Leo, I did have a brief thing where I thought, well, I've only got a few Facebook posts and a website that nobody ever goes to saying I do this healing stuff. I think if I jumped in a church circuit, I'd be able to make it pretty freaking good as a healer of God if I could hide the fact that I've done Reiki. I did have that temptation to jump back into that world as a fraud and do energy healing in that way. It was a very brief, probably drunken thought, financially based. And I was like, oh, no.
Well, for a Leo sun in the 9th with Sagittarius rising, I'm surprised you're not, basically, mate.
Demons
come on down and hear the tale of, hear the word of God and be healed, brothers. Yeah.
Yes. And if I go through a dark phase in my life in the future, then you'll have me telling you to burn this episode. No.
No, it's all right, mate. We'll edit it up good. Thank you so much for dropping by. That's just made my night. I do love it when sun and moon and ascendant all display themselves so clearly and honestly. Thank you for being authentic, mate, and thanks for coming on.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Nice one, buddy. All right, take it easy. Well, there you go. That's Lance Baker, ladies and gentlemen, and a big thanks again to Lance for coming on and sharing his story and being authentic with us. As a postscript, Lance suggested that I have a look at Ben Carson's birth chart. As a reminder, Ben Carson is the neurosurgeon whose autobiography Lance read when he was 10 years old. The reason why Lance asked me to have a look and see if I could find Ben's birth chart was because he was interested to see if there was a connection with Chiron. Unsurprisingly, there is. I couldn't find a birth time for Ben Carson, but I did find his date of birth, and on that day the sun was applying from 24 degrees Virgo to a square with Chiron at 27 degrees Sagittarius. My suspicion is that Ben Carson is a Sagittarius rising, considering his biography or what I could find of it on Wikipedia, but that's another interesting sync and not uncommon in the charts of surgeons and healers and medical professionals, at least from my personal experience. So thanks for listening. You can find Lance at the details that he shared. I'll also share those in the show notes. And if you're interested in a reading with yours truly, check out dragonstoneastrology.com. There are readings and classes and also talismans that I make and sell there. Until next week, guys, take it easy and ciao for now.